Today, I'm going to summarise a paper looking at how patents have changed over the last 40 years in Australia. Using extensive Australian patent data from the years 1980 to 2015, I think Sasan Bakhtiari, sorry for the absolute name, butchery, presents not only an interesting trend in Australian technological development, but the world's. So, why do we care? Well, in short, technology is important. Changes in patent trends tell a story reflecting the types of technology that are invested in and developed. This not only reflects changes in industry and society, but gives us a potential glimpse into what kind of future technology we can expect in the near term. Such critical examination can also help us begin to answer questions like, are we as a society investing in the right technologies? How does Australia differ from other nations? And where can we improve? In short, first we have seen a shift from patents in areas like material metallurgy, chemistry, mechanics, to things like medical technology, civil engineering, organic fine chemistry, and biotechnology. Second, the vast majority of patents filed in Australia are foreign patents. Third, patents have become increasingly niche over time, potentially indicating that we are investing in quick yield research rather than more transformative basic research. However, there's a slight silver lining where this research does indicate that research institutes like university continue to pursue highly basic and impactful research, at least on the patent side of things. The number of patents created in the last 40 years has dramatically increased, despite the rate of patent acceptance falling over time. For context, between the years of 1980 to 2015 on which this data is based, the number of patents accepted every year in the US increased by 5-fold, in Japan 4-fold, and China overtook the USA in 2011. This surge, although to a lesser extent, also applied to Australia, which saw a 2.4 times increase in patent acceptance. In that time period, as I explained earlier, the composition of patents has changed drastically. But also interestingly, there's been intense concentration in the field. In 1980, the top 5 classes of patents represented 10% of all patents, and by 2015, that had increased to 37%. In terms of who's applying for patents that have origins in Australia, it is vastly private companies and individuals, with the ratios not really changing since 1990. Unsurprisingly, 90% of foreign patents are from private companies due to the higher cost and complexity of applying for patents overseas. While 85% of patents in Australia are foreign patents, which means they originated overseas and are likely companies securing global patent protections, this is not something that should be alarming. After all, Australia is a fundamentally small country. As can be seen on the graph, the ratio, since rising significantly in the 80s, has not really changed since 1990. Also, unsurprisingly, patents mainly come from the USA, China, and Japan, and the EU in that order. Mixed patents refer to patents formed by international collaboration that included Australians. While it appears small, and it quite frankly is quite small, with in 2015 there only being 50 such patents, an additional 700 to 800 were only filed in the USA. Given the dominance of foreign patents in Australia, it is essential to split domestic and foreign patents to understand where Australia is advancing, especially relative to the rest of the world. The graph basically shows the popularity of different types of patents split by domestic and foreign firms. Based on the data and statistics from other patent offices, Australia does appear to have developed a niche IT methods for management specialty, which is basically digital technologies and methods specialized to certain applications such as management, commerce, or administration. Try saying that 3 times in a row. Additionally, based on international data, we have a relative focus on civil engineering, furniture, and games. And while we have a relatively similar focus to foreign patents in areas like nanotechnology and semiconductors, we don't appear to have a strong focus in pharmaceutical or biotechnology, which, as I explore patent scope, may be a bit of an issue. So, patent scope. What is it and why is it important? Patent scope is the breadth and applicability of a patent, where generally patents with greater scope are considered to be of greater quality and innovation. Patent scope has been quite low, as can be clearly seen in Australia since 1990, with only a brief jump in 2000 before falling again to a low point today. Interestingly enough, foreign patents have had a significant scope cap until about 2003, where it has since fallen in line with the domestic scope. This long-term drop in scope is, from the author's perspective, a worrying long-term development that indicates companies have been prioritizing small, incremental patents for quick yields rather than more transformative technologies. While this may be a possibility, it may also be because more transformative developments are increasingly difficult or expensive to create. However, this is purely conjecture and is well beyond the scope of this video. In either case, the trend is worrying and may explain some of the lower productivity growth we've seen in the economy over the last decade. There are 2 primary explanations for the falling of scope. First, industries have increasingly moved away from foundational sciences like chemistry and material science to more applicable and generally specialized areas like digital communications. Simultaneously, traditional high-scope areas like chemical engineering over the last 40 years have generally fallen in scope. However, in a little bit of good news, it appears that Australian research institutes are still performing well, where despite research scoping falling by half on average, patents created by such institutes such as universities are on average just as high as they were 40 years ago. So, where is all this patent scope drop coming from? Well, as can be observed in the graph to the right, the vast majority of scope decline has occurred in the patents created by industry. And while initially it appears that Australia has fared better than foreign firms only declined in scope more because they had a higher initial scope to begin with in 1980. Additionally, it is important to note that while Australia may have a niche area in IT methods, furniture, and civil engineering, those are amongst the lowest scope areas, whereas areas such as organic fine chemistry, biotech, and pharmaceuticals are areas with the highest scope that Australia, relative to foreign firms, has produced less patents in. But that's basically it. I thought it was a really cool article. The link will be in the description. I highly recommend you check it out. It obviously goes into a lot more detail and there's a few more sections, especially on innovative patents, that I think if you're interested in this, you'll probably find interesting. So check it out. Thank you.